On a bitterly cold New Year's Eve, a poor little girl walked through the snow-covered streets of a large city. She wore no hat and had only a thin shawl to cover her shoulders. Her shoes, once her mother's, had been too large and had long since been lost in the snow. Barefoot, she trod carefully through the icy streets, her little feet red and swollen from the cold. In one hand, she held a small bundle of matches, which she had been trying to sell all day. But no one had paid her any attention, and she hadn't sold a single match. Now, as evening deepened and snow continued to fall, the street was emptying. Lights were shining brightly from the windows of homes where families gathered to celebrate the new year. The rich aroma of roast goose, pies, and sweet puddings wafted through the air, making the little girl's empty stomach ache. The child was afraid to go home. Her father, a harsh and angry man, would surely beat her if she returned without any money. They were so poor, and every coin mattered. But the night was growing colder, and she had no other choice. Too weak and too cold to take another step, she sank down in the corner of a building, huddling herself against the biting wind. Her hands, now stiff with cold, reached into her pocket and pulled out one of the matches. She hesitated for a moment but then struck it against the wall. The match sparked to life, casting a small, warm flame. For a moment, the girl felt as if she were sitting before a grand, warm fireplace. The flames danced brightly, and she stretched out her hands to warm them. But the match soon flickered out, leaving her shivering once more in the dark, snowy night. Desperate for warmth, she lit another match. This time, the light grew brighter, and she imagined herself sitting at a grand table filled with a feast: roast goose, bread, cakes, and sweets. She could almost taste the delicious food as it filled the air. Her mouth watered, but just as she reached out to take a piece, the match went out, and the grand feast disappeared. She was left alone, cold, and hungry once again. The little girl struck a third match, and suddenly, she saw herself beneath a beautifully decorated Christmas tree. The candles on the tree burned so brightly, casting their glow on the glistening ornaments, and she stared at the sight in awe. The tree seemed to grow taller and taller, stretching toward the sky. But when she reached out to touch one of the candles, the match sputtered and went out. The lights of the Christmas tree faded, leaving only the cold, dark night. Tears welled in the girl's eyes as she struck another match. This time, the light shone more brightly than before, and in its glow, she saw a figure, her beloved grandmother, the only person who had ever shown her true love and kindness. The little girl cried out, "Grandmother!" Her heart swelled with joy at the sight, but she feared that her grandmother would disappear like the visions before. In a panic, she struck all the remaining matches, desperate to keep the vision alive. As the matches flared up together, the light grew brighter and brighter, and her grandmother's face became clearer. Her grandmother smiled at her, a warm, loving smile, and reached out her hand. The little girl rushed into her grandmother's arms, feeling a peace and warmth she hadn't known in so long. They began to rise together, up into the sky, where there was no more cold, no more hunger, no more pain. The next morning, as the new year dawned, passers-by found the little girl huddled in the corner of the building, her body cold and lifeless, with a smile on her face. The spent matches lay scattered around her. They wondered why she had smiled so peacefully in her final moments, unaware of the radiant visions she had seen. No one knew that, in her last hours, the little match girl had found comfort and warmth in the arms of her beloved grandmother as she was carried to a place where suffering no longer existed. And thus, her soul ascended to a place where there was no more cold, no more hunger, and no more sorrow.